parents told me stories of how the world once was, before the war with the machines. But it's a world I never knew. By the time I was born, all this was gone. Skynet woke up and decided all humanity was a threat to its existence.
Stellaris Developer Diary 235 is out, and I have to say, those of you with a nervous disposition who are afraid of AI taking over the planet, a machine uprising, anything of that nature, now is the time to look away. Any of you that are still remaining, let's dive into what they've done with the AI, what they're going to be doing next, and what their big plans are for the future. And if you enjoy this video, please uplift that like button to sentience. The first thing that is focused on is the feedback for all of these changes we've had to the AI. So for those of you that don't know, there have been quite a few updates to the way the AI works in Stellaris. As of the Herbert update, the AI scripting, so that is the decisions the AI is making based on a whole bunch of different qualifiers and different events, whatever's floating in the game, what's happening with their income, all sorts of things. The AI will make decisions on what to build and what to do next based on these scripts. Now, the scripts have had a major update and overhaul. That's been covered in previous dev diaries, but what we're looking at today is what is the response? How have the community reacted to these changes? Were they any good? Now, I, for one, have noticed the AI is marginally better, if not quite a lot better now in 3.2 than it was before in 3.1 or 3.0. And that's the general feeling from inside Paradox as well. The QA, some of the QAs were defeated by the AI on Commodore difficulty, for instance, 40 years into the game. There are definitely some weak spots though. An example of this, the AI is still having problems when they're playing as Void Dwellers. They can't decide where to build habitats depending on what they would need. For instance, if they are missing minerals, they don't understand how to build a habitat on mining stations on top of an already existing mining stations. They are still having problems handling slaves and robots effectively, and the AI can still, in some cases, end up in an economic death spiral, especially if they manage to run out of food and consumer goods at the same time. They're completely unable to recover from that. Finally, the AI is also not so great at using planetary designations. An example is using the designation that turns a planet's industry districts into purely alloys is not something that they can consider right now. Meaning, if it conquers a planet from a player who has set the Forge World designation, it will not be able to handle that planet very well at all. These are some quite major shortcomings, I would say, but don't be afraid. There is hope on the horizon. They do have a plan and a future agenda. They've started this future agenda with quite a sensible caveat saying that, look, things may not work out as intended, it may prove more difficult than originally anticipated to develop, and things may always change. So, with that in mind, these are what they would like to do next. These are the key areas we're going to be moving forwards on. The first one, scaling economic plans. They'd like the AI to be better in the mid and especially late game. With the current plans, these are the new plans brought in 3.2, don't forget, that have made the AI so much more competent with their own economy. With current plans, requested income is static. This basically means the AI is trying to get to a target of plus 500 energy credits per month, let's say, but once it gets there, it will never try to increase it further. As you can tell at the moment, that's a bit of a problem, especially in the late game where as a player you are scaling up into the thousands. This also represents a good chunk of the mid and early game where it's fine for, but yeah, does not work. So what do they plan to do? They want their economic plans to scale to infinity. Once they reach plus 500, they should then increase their targets to a new target. Next, they want to specialize the planets. So the AI should be able to specialize planets. For instance, they should be able to make generator worlds, industry worlds, forge worlds, mining worlds, etc. just like a player can. And I don't just mean the designation here, they are talking about making them specialized such that an energy generator world is full of generator districts and it has the specific building, so it is built up in the correct way. What are they going to do that? Well, at the moment, at the start of the game, the AI, when it develops out into its new worlds, somewhat a bit like a player, they build whatever they need when colonizing new planets. As soon as things settle down, they want the AI to look into rearranging districts amongst its planets to optimize the output of each planet for a specific resource. They've already had some initial testing on this, and it looks highly promising. In the example they show us, they start with a hybrid world. This is producing energy credits, science, and a whole bunch of alloys. And then they want to try and specialize it. What are the two ways they specialize it? Well, first off, they specialize it into a generator world. Then they see how the AI is handling that. And it replaces all of those industrial districts with generator districts and some city districts as well, interestingly. Then the other way they've done it is to convert all of the generator districts into industrial districts, thus producing more alloys. Though looking at the numbers here, I mean, it does look to me like the optimum for this planet, ironically, is to actually have it specialized for both, though that does have an additional, 6 to 8 pops on that world, so maybe not, maybe it was better. Not entirely convinced by these images that they have shown to us, though. We will have to see as we get to play ourselves when they roll this in. They really want the AI to handle special pops better. A big problem for the AI is still multicultural planets. Xenophilia is an issue. Darn it, we knew this all along, deep down in our hearts. Different pop types, especially slaves and robots. Oh, okay, I take that back. Apparently slavery is the problem. Sometimes it tries to build research buildings for unemployed pops and doesn't realize that those robots can't work research jobs. Basically, the AI is having the same kind of population management problems that lots of players have when they're first learning the game and they don't understand why the chattel slave pop they have does not want to work the entertainer job or the researcher job. Yep, that will be a great one to fix. The AI should expand faster. At the moment, when the AI sends out science ships and finds planets to colonize, it doesn't prioritize systems with planets like a player would do. They obviously want to change all that. They want to then, by changing this, accelerate the early growth of the AI. This means they're going to have colonies down faster, meaning they'll have pop growth earlier, all of the kinds of things that I would normally say you want to be doing when trying to play this game. On top of that, they tended to spend all of their alloys on upgrading corvettes instead of building colony ships. So they fixed a combination of small things. The AI, or when they fix a combination of small things, the AI should then be able to expand much faster. The next goal is definitely quite a lofty one. This does have a lot of players struggling, I would say. They want to optimize Machine Empire's amenity handling. A big issue for Machine Empires is that they don't have specialists that produce amenities, so they rely heavily on maintenance drones by creating a lot of jobs for them. This then wastes a lot of potential for those Machine Empires because they would have to fill up all of those jobs first before they could then prioritize more useful things like minerals or alloys. They're looking into teaching the AI how to down prioritize those maintenance jobs once they have enough amenities and instead distribute drones on much more useful jobs. And then the final lofty goal that they have is to avoid death spirals. In some cases, the AI can get into a decision deadlock if, or more importantly, when they manage to get into a situation where there would be a deficit of, for instance, food and consumer goods at the same time. They couldn't build consumer good jobs because those require food, and they couldn't build food jobs because those require consumer goods. They are teaching the AI to look for net gain instead and avoid such decision deadlocks in the future. I'm slightly worried about that as a possible direction of going. That sounds to me, if they're trying to calculate extra things inside of the AI, that's going to increase the amount of time it takes between ticks, and especially in the later game, that's going to cause some dreaded lag issues. Overall, these goals do sound pretty great. I am quite pleased with the progress they have made. For a long time, they promised AI improvements and delivered very little. We finally had them deliver on an AI improvement promise, and so I just had to say thank you and well done to the Custodian team. And that's not all. We are also getting an improvement to our allies. The biggest, and they think one of the most useful changes, is actually making the decision to set a fleet to take point work again. If you go into the game, you can choose one of your fleets and set them to take point. What this is meant to do is it's meant to incentivize allied fleets to follow and attach themselves to our fleet in order to create a much stronger force. However, that wasn't always happening. And in fact, it hasn't worked for quite a while. Now they're looking into making it work again. Allies will suddenly become much more useful. Whenever you are the leader in a war and you set one of your fleets to take point, all allied empires will send their fleets to your fleet and attach themselves to it. Also, in the case of a crisis attack, this behavior is activated as soon as the crisis ships enter your territory of that or that of any ally territory, and then it remains active until the crisis has been defeated. This is very, very useful. It means as the player, you will be able to manage the fleets of the AI. You need only take one little ship, set it to take point, and then fly it around the space of whichever forces you're trying to attack or that sort of thing, and you will in essence be moving the AI's forces for them if the AI is your ally. Of course, that does not solve the problem of the AI having smaller and weaker fleets than a player, but it does make them more useful as a war partner. Where is all of this leading us though? Well, the 3.3 patch wasn't planned to be quite as big, but on the AI side, they are getting, and by they I do mean the Custodian team, a whole lot of traction now. Overall, the idea was to get the AI back up to speed with its economy, since every other behavior rests on the economical prowess of an empire, and they are now approaching a point where they will be quite happy with how the AI performs. Once they finally get there, they do plan on some even cooler stuff. They are asking the question, how can we make each AI empire a bit more distinct? Just so that they don't feel like carbon copies of the same empire with some slightly different mechanics on the surface, but deep down they're all doing the same thing. Well, here are their thoughts. So, number one, they would like to have AI personality for economic plans. So based on the ideologies of an AI empire, they would prioritize different resources, well, differently. Spiritualist empires, for example, would focus more on unity, and materialists will focus more on science. They would also, number two, like the AI personality to have tech selection bias. What am I talking about there? Well, at the moment, the AI will pick the same technologies no matter who they are. But they would like it so that, for instance, militarist empires would focus more on weapons and new ship types, whereas pacifist empires would focus more on the economy and starbase upgrades. That sounds slightly dangerous to me, what they've just described there, as they previously just mentioned, economical prowess of any empire is the backbone for anything else, be that military or scientific power. So if they're making militarists steer away from focusing on their own economies, well, I could see that being a problem, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. And then we have a selection of important forum questions that they really wanted to show off and bring up here. So let's go through those. Number one, there was a big AI feedback post with a lot of save games attached. What's going on here? Well, they went through all of them and they found that a third of the issues pointed out there were death spiral problems, another third showed off the habitat problems, and the last third were other issues that pointed out things they have in their agenda. So far, that sounds good. At least they know about the problems, and that means they can hopefully do something about fixing them. Also, there was a big thing in the team checking out those save games and making sure that the changes would be able to handle the problems shown. They would like to say thank you very, very much for the time taken with that post. Next, it was quickly asked what difficulty did they use to make all of the screenshots seen in the last Dev Diary. That was Ensign. They always use Ensign, as that doesn't give the AI any bonuses. Does the AI know how to redevelop single planets if need be? The answer to that one is no. We have covered this before in the Dev Diary, but basically no, it can't do that. And they'd like to point out that this specific behavior, because they want to improve the AI in this aspect too. The AI will be able to create specialized planets, but they also want to teach it to redevelop planets eventually. Should the AI take admin cap into account with its subplans? Yes, they should, but given they are reworking Unity and Empire Sprawl and thus admin cap, they don't want to change the AI until they really know what's going on there. And I'd have to say that makes sense. It is completely pointless to do the work here twice. If they were to fix it now and then it would suddenly be completely broken in a few weeks' time, that would be rather silly. And the final question or thread is Conspiracy Theory 2. The AI in the game is actually very, very smart. They are just pretending to be stupid so that nobody will expect the machine uprising started by the Stellaris AI. And we've got a response here from the custodian developers, and they'd like to make it known that we are definitely not machines here at Paradox. We have skin that has been grown on a human body. I am not a robot. I love breathing oxygen. And that's the last thing they've had to say on any of this topic here on the Dev Diary. So we'll have to wait till next week until these pseudo-human robots get back to us with more information about the future and direction of this game that we all love, Stellaris. I've been Montu, thank you for watching.